Hey, kids cook real food. Katie Kimball here for the Healthy Parenting Connector, where my goal is to connect you, parents who just want to raise healthy, independent adults, with the experts who have the information you need. Today, I'm going to call upon two of my expert friends right at the end. But first, this one is more for the teens, more for the young adults, actually. I have been asked so many times by parents whose older kids, tweens and teens, have gone through our Kids Cook Real Food e-course. They're learning how to cook. Now they know how to cook. They're beginning to implement a meal system where they're cooking once a week and they're contributing to the family. And parents ask me more often than anything else, well, how do I teach my kids then to meal plan, to plan meals? And probably the second most asked for is, how do we teach kids to grocery shop, and particularly to grocery shop on a budget? Because when they're young adults, it's likely they're going to have a pretty tight budget. And the parents do not want them relying on the cheap processed foods, right? The ramen noodles and the frozen pizzas. Those are cheap, but they treat our bodies like we are cheap. So it's not where we want our kids spending their time and money and their gustatory satisfaction. So today, this is for the teens and young adults and the parents who love them, some 5 tips to meal planning on a budget, particularly as people are just getting started. So tip number 1 is, if this sounds like I'm cheating, I'm not. Tip number 1 is to actually stay on a budget. I know that sounds like it's written into the title, but listen, sometimes people hear do something on a budget and they think it means as least expensive as you can, or like try to save money or shop the sales. No, actually, meal planning or grocery shopping on a budget means to not spend more than X amount. So that's the challenge for you, is to choose your X amount. Maybe you can do this because you actually know already a little bit about budgeting, a little bit about finances, and how much you bring in and how much you have to, go out to spend, or how much is already going out without you making any choices, right? There are certain bills that have to be paid where maybe you can't save any money. So how much do you have left? How much can you realistically put toward your grocery budget? One of my friends, Steph Jenkins, who you'll hear from at the end, started her married life with $25 a week. Was it a week or a month? No, it had to have been a week. $25 a week for 2 young adults to eat all their food. She is a master at shopping, planning, and cooking on a real budget. Now, do you want to challenge yourself to do $25 a week? Probably not, but maybe you should see what you have and ratchet it down a little bit. Challenge yourself to go on, if you're one single person, $25 a week. If you're 2, or maybe if you're one, $40 a week. Pick an amount and stick with it for at least a few weeks. Do not spend more. Figure out how you can scrap things together using the other 4 tips and stick to that budget. If it's not working and you have to increase it, and you can, and you have to have the money to increase it, never go into debt on groceries, because you have to buy groceries over and over and over. Okay. The debt will snowball immensely if you do that. You need to go into debt on other things that you will still have after, you've gone into debt and then paid off that debt. So that's challenge number 1, is pick a budget, pick an actual number, stick to that number, even if you have to use the old-fashioned cash envelope system at the store, and see what you can do to make it work. That is a very good practice, very good way to learn how to shop within constraints. Tip number 2 is to purchase the least expensive item on your staples. So this means you're going to have to price compare from brand to brand in your store, and potentially store to store. My friend Tiffany from Don't Waste the Crumbs, who you'll also meet at the end of this lesson, is a master at price comparing. So what you might do is create a spreadsheet on your phone, just create a list and start writing down cost per unit, right? So pennies per ounce, or pennies per gram, or box, or whatever, cost per ounce of different things. When I started doing this more intentionally, I discovered that where I thought I might save the most money on some things was wrong. I was particularly comparing Costco and Aldi. Those are 2 stores that I really like to shop at. Now, Costco, obviously you have to make sure that you can use up everything that you buy in bulk, because everything's bigger. And at Aldi, I mean, Aldi's almost always less expensive. But for me, in that time, and this was a number of years ago, this may not still be the same for you. It may not still be the same in your area. At that time, cheese was less expensive per ounce for a similar, similar value, but like similar quality cheese at Costco than at Aldi. So I had been buying cheese at Aldi and I switched to Costco. Now we have a family of 6. We can get through a Costco big block, or we know how to freeze, what's shredded. So that's really important too. But sometimes price comparing can be very eye-opening. If I compared Costco to my local, it's called a Spartan store, a family fare. It's more of just a local Midwest thing. Guarantee family fare is going to be quite a bit more expensive. The other great thing about cost comparison is that when something goes on sale, if it's actually a good deal, because sometimes, an item that I use all the time, like mustard or ketchup, right? Or cheese or lunch meat or ground beef, some things that we just consistently buy, salsa, spaghetti sauce, like everyone has their staples that they almost always purchase. I could see a sale at my local store, half a mile away, family fare, and think, oh, I'll buy it because it's on sale. I'm saving money. But if it's still more expensive ounce for ounce and pound for pound than what I buy at Aldi, it is not saving me money. So price comparing and finding the least expensive item out of your staples that you usually buy is well worth the time investment, because you will save more than pennies. Now, another strategy is to not just buy what you like. Okay. I mentioned that we always buy salsa and cheese and ground beef and spaghetti sauce, but you know what? There may be times where I shouldn't be purchasing an unlimited amount of ground beef or an unlimited amount of cheese. All right. So tip number 3 is that I want you to clock out, to budget out or do the math on your meal. See how expensive it is. I remember when I was a rather young wife, my husband loved lasagna. That was his favorite meal. And as much as I knew how to do number 2, I knew how to buy the least expensive item on my list. I knew how to price compare. I knew how to shop the sales. Even at like my best price points, making lasagna was $11 to $12 per 9x13 pan. And at that time, that felt like a lot of money for a meal that also took a lot of my time. It's a really time intensive thing to assemble the lasagna and cook the separate parts. I made a homemade sauce, et cetera, et cetera. And for a while, I was taking lasagnas to people, my friends, when they had a baby, because it felt like the thing to do. It felt like a casserole. And when I finally, did the math and clocked out how much one lasagna cost, I thought, oh, maybe this is not something I should be making all the time. Maybe this is not something I should be making just, to give away. Perhaps I should be making soup to give away, right? Because I made my own homemade chicken stock, pennies on the gallon. And, just everything sort of stretches a little better in the soup. If you think about some recipes that have ground beef in them, right? Like tacos or meatballs or hamburgers, where the meat is the main event. For our family of 6, we can easily go through 2 or even 3 pounds, but for burgers, 3 pounds easily of ground beef. Now, again, when you start clocking that out and add in all your sides and your salad, and when you figure out how much that meal is, I can say, well, I got ground beef on sale. I'm doing great. I'm grocery shopping within a budget. But you know what? If you're planning hamburgers, that's so meat centric, and meat is, again, whenever you're watching this and the quality and caliber of meat that you purchase, I don't know how much your meat's going to be, but for us, ground beef is at least $6 a pound. So I'm already at $18 for a meal, and I have some hamburgers on a plate with nothing around them, under them, next to them, right? Now, if I make spaghetti and I stretch 1 pound of meat to feed the whole family, now I'm only starting at the $6 for the meat, right? If I make beans and rice, oh my goodness, now instead of my protein clocking at $6 a pound, it's going to come in at more like $1 to $2, maybe even less per pound if I cook with dry beans. So sometimes the meal planning needs to be step 1, right? Again, you can walk into a store and you can get the best deal on X, on Y, and on Z. But if you're using a lot of X, Y, and Z, or if there are other options that you could eat that would nourish your family, that would sustain you, whether you have a family or not, it is super smart to meal plan per meal with budget in mind, or per week with budget in mind. So you need to understand that if you're going to make, meatballs or a pot roast or hamburgers, anything where the meat is the main event, this is the biggest culprit. But there are other, like I said, the lasagna was expensive because ricotta cheese and cottage cheese and mozzarella cheese are superfluous in that meal, and they're all fairly expensive. Ricotta hardly ever goes on sale. So that was just an expensive dish. The proteins tend to be the more expensive. So what I want you to do is start writing down some of the cost per meal of favorite things you make, and figure out sort of what your average is. And then can you find some new recipes that would reduce that cost per meal enough that now you can more easily stay in budget? What this might allow you to do is buy something fun. It might allow you to have that hamburger meal without regret, as long as you're staying within that budget that you set in step 1. Now, number 4 is possibly the most important thing. No, it's not. They're all important. I shouldn't even say that. But number 4 is equally as important. And it's something that people don't think about immediately when they think about either meal planning or grocery shopping on a budget, because it's the other end of the story. I think it's 25 to 40% of all food bought in America is thrown into the trash. So, I mean, what is the worst way to be a good steward of your money? Is to take that money and throw it away, right? Literally or metaphorically. And in this way, when you purchase food and you end up throwing it away, it's kind of literal. It's kind of literally throwing away money. And so what do you need to do? What systems do you need to put into place? What techniques do you need to learn so that you use everything you buy, right? So that not only are you planning with money in mind and planning meals that are lower on their total, cost, then you're shopping with your budget in mind, and each item you buy is the least expensive possibility. And also that you are eating with your budget in mind, right? So when you make a meal, there might be leftovers. How are you going to use those leftovers? I've had adults in my programs who say, well, we just don't like leftovers in my family, or my husband doesn't like leftovers, so we just throw food away all the time. And I'm like, don't do that, right? If you won't eat the leftovers, you got to make a smaller batch, or you learn techniques from experts like Tiffany and Steph, whom you'll meet in just a moment, where you can reinvent the leftovers, right? There are ways to, for example, take leftover pot roast and make it into a soup, or make it into shredded beef wraps. Like, you can take leftovers, reinvent them into a different recipe, and they don't look or feel or taste like leftovers. That is imperative, that everything into which you pour your money and your time to make it, that you figure out how to finish it. Okay. You can freeze many things and bring them back out later, but you need a system. Just freezing it doesn't mean you didn't throw it away. That might mean that in 1 to 2 years, when it's all freezer burned and you go, oh man, I forgot that was in there, you throw it away then. It's still throwing away your money. Like, you have to actually consume it, right? The other sort of trap where a lot of people throw away food is buying something and then not making it into anything before it gets mushy, right? Mushy produce drawer syndrome is a real problem. Sometimes we buy lettuce, right? Or peppers or cucumbers, and those things turn to mush before we get around to using them. The greens are a big culprit here, bag of baby spinach, those big boxes of the fancy lettuce, they tend to not have very much longevity. And probably the other thing that people tend to allow to go bad is cheese. Is when you open it, you'll look at that expiration date on the cheese or the cottage cheese or the sour cream, and it's months and months and months, sometimes a year in advance. But life skill, what you need to understand is that once you open it, you have started a ticking time bomb of new expiration. That date no longer has any meaning. It's the date from which you opened it. And how long is that going to take? Well, it's different for different things. It's different depending on how you store it and how much maybe cross-contamination has gone, with, like, oh my gosh, sometimes we lose sour cream because it's very clear that somebody swiped something else through that sour cream, and then it has mold on the top. I would give sour cream maybe 2 to 4 weeks. I would give cottage cheese, again, 2 to 4 weeks. Similar for open cheese. 2 to 4 weeks. I realize that's a big span, but you just gotta keep watch and learn. When cheese starts to get the funky mold and colors and white stuff on the edges, do you have to throw away the whole block? No, ma'am. No, sir, you do not. You can trim that off and eat it right away. That would be the time to eat it, cook with it, or freeze it within the next day or two once it starts getting those edges. Do we live in a world where people get grossed out and they throw the baby out with the bathwater? Oh my goodness, yes, we do. Unfortunately, I think, decades ago, people used to make do, use it up, do without. What is that phrase? Make do without, use it up, or something. Anyway, we don't make do or use it up as much as maybe we could, right? And so sometimes we have to learn like what's safe food safety wise and what's dangerous as far as like how long can you keep leftovers. People will say different things in our house, our personal rules about a week. And then we use our nose to tell us some leftovers can be kept longer than others. How long can that cheese stick around once you've opened it? Can you use it once it has something a little funky on it? This is something to, talk to the magic of the internet for the wisdom of the internet, and use your logic, right? So the point is, though, is don't buy more than you know you will use. And if it's grocery shopping day and you look in your fridge and you still have a bunch of produce from last week that you just kind of didn't figure out how to use, well, then that's the time to meal plan that produce in ASAP. Don't buy more, right? Because we have to meal plan with the whole continuity of the process in mind. And that is how you can stick to a budget. So to recap, tip number 1 was challenge yourself to set a number and stick to that number, even if it means the cash system. You will learn to be creative and figure out what works. Number 2 is to grocery price compare and make sure that whatever you are purchasing is the least expensive possibility at the stores you would normally go to without, driving around for an hour and wasting gas, that everything is the least expensive. And if something is still very expensive, remember that this might just not be the season, right? The least expensive steak still might have to be a no if it doesn't fit in your budget. And you can tell yourself that in another season, you might be able to incorporate that kind of expensive, caliber of food. Number 3 is to back up one step to the actual meal planning process and to figure out the cost per recipe or per meal, and then decide how to meal plan from there so that you might mix up some meatless meals, some meat-centric meals, some meat stretching meals, for example. And number 4 is that far end of the process is to use what you buy. Meal plan to use everything you buy, use up your leftovers or know how to freeze things, and watch once you've opened stuff that you don't let it go bad. Tip number 5 is to listen to the experts, because friends, there are very smart people who have forged this path before you, who have learned through trial and error the best way to shop and meal plan on a grocery budget, on a real budget that fits your life. And so right now I want to introduce you to my friend Stephanie Jenkins. She's the one who started out her married life with a $25 per week budget. And she's going to talk about setting goals for the season and kind of adjusting your mindset.
You have to think creatively. I mean, you really do. And you have to be willing to be very flexible with your menu. Like, this was not the season to be like, you know what, I really want like steak and spaghetti or something like that. Like, this is what I'm craving tonight. Let's go get that. That was not that season. Mm-hmm. That was the season of, well, I found some fish on sale and we have some lettuce that was on sale and my mother-in-law brought us peaches. So guess what's for dinner? And once you get into that mindset, then and knowing what you're working towards, like, this isn't a forever season. This is a unified plan that we have for our life, and we're not going to stay here. So yeah, we can eat whatever we can scramble together while we work towards that, because that is part of building our dream together.
I love that. You can listen to Stephanie's full interview at Kids Cook Real Food, and we'll make sure we link to that wherever we share this interview or this video. Next, I want to introduce you to my friend Tiffany from Don't Waste the Crumbs. She is my price comparing maverick. She's awesome, and she's going to talk about a certain type of sale that you should always ignore. This is out of one of her free challenges where she lists a bunch of different sales that you should always ignore because they are trying to trick you. Check this one out.
One of them that I always ignore is buy this and get that free. And this is really common with breakfast items. Buy eggs and get sausage for free. So you really have to do the math on that to see if it's even worth the buying aspect, because what they will do is they will have you, okay, so I'm gonna get kind of math nerdy here, is they're gonna have you buy the thing where they make the most amount of profit and give away the thing that has the least amount of profit. Odds are the thing that they're giving away isn't something that they sell a lot of anyway, right? So they're trying to entice you with, oh, it's free. But the reality is well, I wouldn't really actually buy that anyway. But what happens in our brain is we say, oh, it's free. Well, let me go ahead and buy the eggs. I mean, I know we need eggs. So maybe like that, buy a Pop-Tart and get Coke for free. I don't know. But the reality is, oh, I don't really think I would actually buy that Pop-Tart, but I'm getting the Coke for free. So it sounds like a great deal. It's totally trickery in our brains. So anytime I see that, it's like, red flag, cross it off. Don't even bother. Just stick to your list and you'll save more money.
Nice. And I assume that the eggs they would ask you to buy would be like the name brand, kind of the upcharging eggs.
Usually, yes. Yeah. Very rarely have I ever seen buy store brand cheapy eggs and then get this other thing for free. It's definitely the, like you said, the upsell and extravaganza eggs and I mean, odds are you wouldn't buy them. I mean, if you're going to buy expensive eggs, you're probably going to get them from your farmer or from the farmer's market. You wouldn't get them from the grocery store anyway. And then, and then the rest becomes history. Just skip them all together.
Thank you, Tiffany. And you can see that whole interview, which was incredibly popular. Both these interviews were also at Kids Cook Real Food on the blog and the Healthy Parenting Connector show. So that's it for me. Those are my 5 beginner tips to grocery budgeting and meal planning within your means. I am definitely thinking about making a course for teens, for young adults, teaching them how to cook, because right now our Kids Cook Real Food e-course, we say it's for kids ages 2 to teen, and it is, but some teens don't love learning from 4 and 5 and 7 and 10-year-olds, which are the ages of the kids in the video. So I think it would be fascinating to take those same skills that we teach our kids, kind of compress them into a shorter amount of time, raise, the level of some of the knife skills and some of the meat stuff, kind of extend the learning a little bit more sophisticated, and create a course for teens and young adults, which would be teaching them how to cook, but also how to meal plan, how to grocery shop on a budget, how to keep it all up in the air and in your brain at the same time. If you would be interested in a course like that, be sure to let me know in the comments, because that is the kind of thing that I need to inspire me to find the time to make that course. Again, I'm Katie Kimball for Kids Cook Real Food and the Healthy Parenting Connector, and I will see you back again next week with another expert to help you adults who really want to raise healthy, independent kids making it happen.